Welcome to Mage Talk Live, the Magento Community Podcast. I'm Kalen.
And I'm Philip in HD.
And what? In HD. In high def.
High fidelity definitions.
High def. The highest of defs. So you have a new camera and a new rig.
I've got a toy. I've got a new toy. Here, check this out, you guys. Here, I'm going to take a picture of the absolute ridiculousness that this little mobile setup is now. Dang. Okay. Look at that. Hold on. Look at that. What is that number? What? Holy cow. That looks really good on this camera.
Dude, that does look fantastic.
That looks pretty good. I'm going to tweet that picture, by the way. For the people listening along at home, my muscle looked really big on the camera for no good reason whatsoever.
He totally pulled one of those like, which way is it to the beach? Oh, it's this way. Except it was like the vlogger version of that. Nice move. Well done. Well executed.
I'm loving it. Well, I'm now full on internet streamer. I'm that guy. I've made the transition.
Question from Alejandro Perez in the chat. He says, "Why not 4K?"
Perez.
Come on.
I am on hotel Wi-Fi. This is costing, like, let me tell you, this is going to cost me like $75 just to stream. I just want you to know that.
Like, we spared no expense to come to you live and bring a special Mage Talk After Dark edition live from half of us are live from IRCE.
Half of us are live. The other half are still very much asleep.
The other half is hanging out in a Barca lounger. What did you call
lounger? It? Yeah, do you know what a Barca lounger is?
I don't.
A Barca lounger. Let me tell you, it's a recliner. It's exactly what you think it is.
Okay.
It's the recliner that you're in right now.
What does the Barca stand for?
It's probably like Lazy Boy. It was. I'll bet you anything. It was probably like a brand.
Okay.
Like all bleach is now Clorox, and all.
Got it.
All Tylenol, all acetaminophen, is
Kleenex. Yeah. Got it.
Well, this is fantastic radio so far.
This is.
Do you remember? Let me ask you this. Do you remember when our very first Mage Talk After Dark was?
Oh, I don't, but we used to always do them at night in the very beginning.
We did. Right? That was our thing. We talked for like 3 or 4 hours and we're like, this is stupid. We should just be like podcasting.
This is taking me back, dude. Like for the first, I don't know, 6 months or a year or so, we would do them all at night.
Yeah. And then we did them like way early in the morning. You remember that?
Oh,
yeah, we did them. We used to do the podcast at like 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning, Kalen's time at one point.
That was nuts.
Because then that was like 7:30 my time or 8 o'clock my time, and that's where the sipping meme came from, because you would be drinking coffee when we first started the podcast. Yeah. You'd be like sipping, and Kalen, you cannot be sipping into the microphone. You can't be doing that.
Man, we've really put in some time over the years.
We have. I have 10 to 15 with no chance of parole. That's what I've got. I'm serving a very long sentence. Is what it's
you tried to get out, but we didn't quite let you. So, IRCE, what's the vibe? What's cracking? What's going on over there?
IRCE is cooking, so it's day one. A little slow for day one. However,
are there pre-events like with the is day one really day one, or are there like pre-day one things that happen?
No, so day one is a workshop. It's very similar to like Imagine. But have you ever been to IRCE?
No, I have not. I've been asked about it no less than like 17 times. Like, hey, you're going to be at IRCE. So I really probably should put it in the rotation.
And which is Mage Talk, I think, for 4 years running now. 4?
Yeah, 4 years, I think.
I think we're coming up on 4 years.
We really should figure out what our anniversary date is.
I believe that we know that date. I think it's
so that we can both disappoint each other even more than we already do on the day of our anniversary.
Yeah. Kalen, you disappoint me every day of the year. You don't have to pick one special day of the year to disappoint me.
Right.
IRCE.
IRCE.
Magento are doing some what they're calling straight talk sessions
Right.
for 3 days. So they are like very, very, I don't know, like sort of targeted talks that are very much on topic for what Magento is talking about these days. Like, for instance, there's Josh Warren is doing a straight talk session here at IRCE with the folks from Rural King.
It's a tough one. It's even
Rural
harder
King.
for me since I just moved to Texas, so the R's are getting lazier and lazier. Rural.
Did you ever see the 30 Rock? Did you ever watch 30 Rock?
I have, yeah,
So
absolutely.
there's the Rural Juror is the show that she was in.
I don't remember that one.
And there's she has this whole song about the rural juror, and the lyrics to that song are pretty hilarious. I'm gonna have to try to find them, but rural is hard to rural is hard to say. Juror is kind of right.
Like
so the lyrics.
Like
the lyrics of Rural Juror are the Irma Lerman Merman murder. Turn the bird's word lurid, the whir and the purr of a twirler girl. She would the world were demure. The insurer's allure for valor were pure. Carry whir, one fervid whirl over her turgid error.
What's happening right now? Oh my God. Why do I even do podcast interviews with other people? Like,
I don't know.
I'm trying to reach for something that only exists between us two. By the way, there are people waiting on Twitter for that photo that you promised.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, I've been trying to do that, but we keep getting distracted. So the Rural King folks are speaking with Josh Warren of Creativity, and that's part of Magento's sort of ongoing discussion around like what B2B can be delivering. And like sort of the synergies of things like order management and ship from store and that sort of thing. So it's very, very cool.
That's cool.
I didn't sit in on that talk or anything, but I'm it's things like that, I guess, is the point that I'm trying to make.
Yeah, I was curious what the like when I've seen a couple of times where they're calling them straight talk sessions. And I was worried, like, is that like, because it almost sounded to me like, hey, we're gonna be straight with you, like we're gonna just lay it all on we're gonna lay all our cards out, like instead of maybe having maybe a little more fluff. There's always a certain amount of fluff, but is that the vibe? Like, is that the vibe that they're going for with the straight talk?
I don't know. I've not sat in one yet, but I'll ask somebody and we'll see what they say. My sense is probably that if you've ever sat in a conference talk of any kind whatsoever, you probably wouldn't know that this was a straight talk session. That is probably just another conference talk.
Right.
But I'm also given to be sort of judgy.
This is true. How does IRCE compare to, like, because I only go to Imagine, and I'm curious, how does IRCE compare to like other conferences, like Imagine, Shop Talk, some of these other events that our people may be attending? But what's it like?
It's a lot bigger. I'll say that.
Okay.
I think some of the things that you're probably used to hearing, probably this year in particular, some of the things that you saw at Imagine this year are very common in larger shows like IRCE. So like expo only tickets, right? So you don't get to attend any of the talks, or you don't go to the like main keynotes. That is very much a thing here because they probably couldn't even fit them all in, even if they tried. Because the reason, I mean, we're talking the expo hall has, I don't know, 1,000 booths. I'm not kidding. It's gigantic.
Wow.
Not as big as the big show, NRF, which is usually in New York. But this is a very, very, very large show, and pretty much, anybody in digital commerce the world over is here. If they're not exhibiting and they don't have a booth, then they're attending.
Got it.
Yeah. And it's a good show. It's more of a networking show. You definitely have bigger parties here. In that, there's some larger companies that are, also putting on sort of parties. They're making events out of it. But I would be remiss if I didn't also mention that Shipper HQ are also hosting a Straight Talk session.
I noticed that.
Yeah, and there's a few others.
Karen, man, she knows how to straight talk. That's for darn sure. She knows.
It's like she's giving a master class. It's not even a session. Just go through her last 5 years on Twitter. That is your straight talk session. She's just gonna sit there on Twitter. She's like,
once you go to that session,
you guys,
you're gonna be doing nothing but pure, unadulterated straight talk for the rest of your life. You're gonna be in full straight talk mode. Is Adobe out there representing?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. I haven't walked the whole floor yet. Whoops, I moved my camera.
You haven't gone through and itemized all of the people in the booths.
Let me tell you about my day. I woke up at 3:15 this morning and went to the airport, and then circled Boston Logan to arrive 2 hours late, and had to return to the gate twice for mechanical issues on my plane. And I got here at 4 p.m. Many hours after I was scheduled to actually arrive. So I have had very little time to show today.
Then you got to the hotel, knocked out, woke up, and then started this podcast.
No, actually, we went and did like a client dinner and kill me. It's been a crazy day. By the way,
just talk about the dinner. Can we just talk about the client dinner? I'd love to hear about like the wines that you had. I mean, I know how you guys roll, dude. It's fantastic.
Well, I'm living my best sober life now. So I had a mocktail.
Okay.
You know what a mocktail is, Kalen?
Like a virgin cocktail?
No, it's when you drink something that causes everyone in the restaurant to mock you. That is why they call it a mocktail.
Got it. I've done that before. I had a I was hanging out with a actually ex-Magento guy here in Austin, and I think he works for Salesforce now. Anyway, so he was like, "Oh,
you're pretty sure he works.
I'm pretty sure." And he was like, "We went, hey, let's go get some lunch, whatever." So we're getting some lunch, and then he gets a beer, and I asked the waiter like for recommendations. He said, "Oh, everybody likes this pomegranate, something with something or other." So he brings it, and it's this like full on like pink drink. I looked across the table. I said, "We never speak of this." And of course, now I'm speaking about it on a nationally syndicated podcast. So, what are you gonna do?
You could not speak of it. That's what you could do.
Could do that,
but that's not how you roll. It's not like you.
It's not what I do. It's
this
really
photo is not uploading, guys. I don't know. I'm trying.
Okay. By the way, you're probably gonna start to feel a little stabby and murdery when I tell you this, but your video is kind of going off and on. Your audio stays in the whole time, but a couple of people noticed in the chat your video turns off and on, which is fine, which is totally fine.
I mean, it looks fine on my end, but I'm on hotel Wi-Fi, so I couldn't possibly even begin to debug what my $75 Wi-Fi could possibly, the experience that you might be having for my $75.
I'm sure it's going to look fine on the playback. I'm sure it's going to be beautiful in the playback.
Doubtful, highly doubtful. Let's talk for a second about how at once upon a time you used to give me crap for drinking at events, and now you're talking about how people shouldn't be ordering pink drinks at. And it's a point of shame. Let's talk about that for a second.
let's get into that. Let's dig into that.
You want to dig into that a little bit?
Let's get into it.
When you moved to Texas, you became like a different person. I don't even know who you are anymore. Something you hang in
the water.
You hang UT baseball caps on your wall.
Can you dig it?
You lay in a Barca lounger and podcast.
Drink pink drinks.
Drink pink drinks. And then you call out people who don't pay you on Twitter and drag them through the mud.
People that pull a Marco on me.
Don't shame people. That's not nice.
I'm gonna turn that into a verb.
No, you You can drag that mud all over Commerce Hero all you want. I'm not going to have it on our show.
What is the deal with people saying it's unprofessional to call somebody out publicly when they don't pay, like when they cheat you out of thousands of dollars, and all of a
I told you
sudden
I meant it sounded like a really good idea in my head to bring this up, and then I realized this is a really bad idea. I shouldn't have brought it up.
You really don't want to bring it up.
I'll be honest with you. I didn't even know that it happened until today when I got to the show, and everyone's like, "What's wrong with Kalen?
Really?
Like, he's losing it, man." No, I'm just kidding. Nobody said he's losing it.
Okay.
I feel like it's really uncharacteristic for you, though. I'm like, you just don't know Kalen. If you knew Kalen, like, this is absolutely characteristic of Kalen.
Well, the thing is that this is becoming a major section of this whole podcast, which I'm actually fine with.
I know
I actually held off on doing it for a long time because I was worried that it would look weird and things like that. But I was like, dude, like that's not right. Like, it's not right
for brother paid.
Yeah, I mean, it's not right for somebody to cheat you out of thousands of dollars, and then you say something about it, people will give you a hard time. It's weird. I don't
As
get
a
it,
person
man.
who has been in business with you for many years,
yes,
and a person who has had in years past of conversations about formalizing business agreements.
Yes,
there are moments where your arrangements can be very soft and very nebulous and soft. And I have to put myself in the person's position of, did I know I was agreeing to tens of thousands of dollars worth of work here? I have to think about that. I have to wonder. I got to wonder. I'm just saying.
You're killing me. I've never tried to shake you down.
That's true. You did one time. You sent me a passive aggressive Commerce Hero cancellation notice. Like, wait, your opportunity is now canceled. You should feel bad about yourself.
No, we were trying to close out jobs in the system, and
I feel this is a terrible topic.
This is derailing heavily. We did have a question from Alejandro in the chat.
Not in the chat. I need to get in the chat.
Which is GitHub there? I don't know if they're there or not, but that brings us into the whole Microsoft GitHub acquisition, which is an interesting.
I like this topic because this is a topic that we should probably be speaking about, as opposed to the one that we are talking about, which is terrible and nobody should be talking about. So, you know what's funny is that it's going to the Magetalk logo when I talk now. So it looks like my video is going in and out. It's kind of weird.
No, I see your video. I got your video.
Oh, good. All right, I home.
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
Microsoft acquisition.
Tell me what you think about the GitHub acquisition. Oh, tell people who don't know what the news is.
Okay.
What the news is.
If you've been living under a rock with no internet access and you just got access tonight,
you could just tell what it is. Tell them what it is. You don't have to berate them and the fact that they have better things to do with their life.
Microsoft acquired GitHub, or they've made plans, or they've made some agreement.
Something's happened and they're buying.
It's going to happen.
Okay.
And so, it's interesting. There's a lot of people with that sort of gut negative reaction in the same way that they reacted to the Adobe acquisition, right? And the acquisition was for $7.5 billion. Thanks, Alejandro, for pointing. Alejandro's really coming in clutch in today's live stream.
I know. He's like, let's look at him for show notes from now on. Actually, Alejandro, if you need a job doing show notes, give me a ring.
I want to give you a massive shout out. Also, same last name as my wife, so keeping it in the family.
Isn't her last name Jordan?
Well, maiden name. So
very progressive of you. You took her last name.
Yeah. $7.5 billion, so a lot of people are like, oh, Microsoft, and posting videos of Steve Ballmer acting crazy and things like that, and Microsoft is doesn't get open source, but the truth is and it's interesting because the same is true of Adobe, where a lot of people think of Microsoft and Adobe, or just large companies in general. They have this mental model of them, which is really old. And it's like their mental model never updates as the companies change and evolve. Like Microsoft under the new CEO, Satya what's his name? So I don't remember his
Nadej?
name off the top of my hand. Off
We
the top of
should
my
know
head.
those. That you should know that sort of thing,
You
though,
should know
right?
that if you're going to try to speak on the topic of Microsoft.
Possible.
But he, he's really changed things quite a bit. I mean, they've got arguably the most popular, open source code editor, right, with Visual Studio Code. And they've been getting pretty heavy into open source. And so, really realistically, it's probably a pretty good move. I didn't realize this, but GitHub has been in search of a CEO for like 9 months. I had no idea. I thought GitHub was doing amazingly well, but I guess the previous CEO, I believe the one of the founders, resigned like 9 months ago or so, and they've been trying to get a new CEO and having issues with that. So so yeah, so it's a very interesting move. On the face of it, it's like 7.5 billion for GitHub. Like why? Like
Yeah, that's like 4.46 Magentos for one GitHub.
Yeah, yeah.
That's I didn't do that math at all before we started this show.
Satya Nadella. Yeah, I had it right. I had it right the
Okay.
whole time.
Okay. All right.
CEO Satya Nadella. Yeah. So anyway, so those are my thoughts on the matter.
Here's the thing, right? Because I think you're right on. I think you're 100% correct, and people are actually going to watch me source my source things now because you can see me. You can see that I'm not looking in the camera nowadays. I'm gonna have to get used to this. There's a developer who is really well known in the mobile, or I'm sorry, in the database space, and her name escapes me. I think it's Kelly. I'm looking for her tweet now. She said something
Clarkson,
that no, Kelly Clarkson. Yeah,
different
yeah,
Kelly, different
yeah,
Kelly.
definitely Kelly Clarkson. She was saying, like, she basically called everybody out and said, you cannot bash a company for a decade and tell them they need to get with the program with open source, and then they do, and you
I saw that
still
tweet.
and then you still never accept that they've listened to everything that you've been telling them to do, and endlessly berate. So, like, it's, to some degree, it's like incredibly unfair that these companies have put tremendous investment into becoming the good citizens that we've asked them to be for years, and no one will actually step up and take notice. I also saw a few other tweets that people within the Microsoft organization love and respect GitHub in a big way,
Right,
and
right.
they're big advocates of GitHub, and they wouldn't let it happen. They wouldn't let Microsoft effectively dismantle it. Now, I think it's really funny when you look at what Microsoft has done to Skype, and you and I both have a hate relationship with Skype at this point. Like, nobody needs Instagram stories in Skype, right? But I love the idea of having Instagram type stories in GitHub. I think that's hilarious, and I think we should be allowed to joke about that sort of thing.
I don't think I've seen the Instagram stories features in Skype. The only thing that bothers me about the new Skype interface is that it's hard to search for people. There's no add contact button anymore, and it's hard to see recent conversations. That's all I want. That's all I want with Skype. Other than that, it works fine. Sometimes I
No,
had to chase
the
a
new
guy.
UI is so bad. The new UI
I
is
don't.
terrible. It's so bad.
I
I'll get used
agree.
to it.
Agree to disagree.
It doesn't
Agree to
matter.
disagree.
Okay, at any rate,
Um,
like, here's what it comes down to is there are a lot of companies that depend on GitHub, and a lot of coding paradigms that we all use that depend on GitHub. Okay?
yeah.
So, we depend on Composer. We depend on Node Package Manager, right? And all of the repos that serve open source and the paradigms that we use to actually drive our modern development are basically like live and die on GitHub. Now, you could migrate away, you could go to GitLab, you could use something else, but those projects are effectively de facto hosted on GitHub for a reason. And that's what Microsoft is buying. Microsoft is buying the fact that the entire world and all of its programming, runs on GitHub infrastructure.
Yeah. I think
right?
that
There's a community
yeah,
behind it, but that's incredibly powerful if you want to understand how to build products and how to build tools that people build software for you to fundamentally understand how that software is being deployed and where it's being hosted and the infrastructure that is used to run it and create communities around it. And Microsoft's really good at creating communities, whether people want to believe that or not. It's true.
yeah. What are I mean, I had a whole bunch of follow-up
Yeah, go ahead, go
statements,
ahead, go ahead.
and but then I don't what are some examples of Microsoft communities?
Oh
No,
my gosh, I
there's
mean, like there's decades worth of
probably a dumb
examples.
question.
I
Yeah.
mean, C Sharp has its own, developer community, and to the point that C Sharp is running on open source Linux, like on Red Hat in the enterprise today. You can compile. Like there was a whole community effort just to allow to bring C Sharp, uh, I think runtime or JIT. I
Hmm.
forget the term
Hmm.
to allow C Sharp to run on open source
Okay.
stacks, and that's just one tiny example. There's all kinds of other examples. Microsoft is a huge maintainer of all kinds of major um, efforts, not just Visual Studio Code, which is an open source, IDE. It goes like all the way down to NPM and Babel and React and like all the major libraries that we're all going to depend on when PWA lands in the Magento world. Those Microsoft has been maintainers or contributors to those projects for 3 to 4 years. So
Yeah.
and that's just the modern stuff. I mean, there's decades of Windows developers communities. The Windows Developer Conference was one of the largest developer conferences in the whole world for 20 years.
Oh
So
wow.
they create. It may not be open source traditional way that we understand open source.
Right.
But it's still community. It's still
Right.
developer community.
Right. By the way, it may actually, it might be that your camera turned off. I don't know if it's a bandwidth issue. If you
Oh,
might want to try switching to the laptop one, see what that does. But I mean, I think that it seems like the acquisition was really to go after the developer base that's on GitHub. I don't totally understand exactly how developers are going to be sort of pulled into the Microsoft ecosystem from GitHub, from GitHub because of the acquisition. But I can imagine different ways they might do integrations with it, things like that. But yeah, and I think they stated that that was the stated purpose to really, they've been kind of courting developers in lots of different ways in recent years, and I think that that's probably a huge competitive advantage for their cloud off, all their different cloud offerings and Azure and all this, all the stuff they're trying to do. So I think it's going to be an interesting, so with GitHub, you've got public repositories for open source stuff and then private repositories.
right.
And I think that it'll be interesting to see what happens with private repositories. There might be a lot of companies that might not feel comfortable with Microsoft, quote unquote, own like having access to their code. Alejandro mentioned in the chat, with conspiracy hat on, they did it to be able to search the code and steal
Oh,
stuff
give
other
me a
people do.
break.
That yeah, I mean, I don't, obviously that wouldn't make any sense. I mean, legally you'd have to be crazy. I will say, um, I was actually talking to Daniel Kenny about it, and he was, saying that he was looking into it, and I was like, well, there's no way that Microsoft legally has any access to any of the
No,
private code,
of course not.
even on like an aggregate basis, to perhaps run machine learning and AI and stuff like that. And he
Right.
actually had read the terms of GitHub, and apparently there is some level of access. I don't remember offhand if it's just aggregate or something like that. But I think in the terms, there is some level of access that GitHub has even into private repositories, which is kind of wild.
Okay. I mean, I can't comment on that because I don't know that to be true. It sounds like the kind of thing that somebody read on Reddit and, you know, somebody else
No,
might
no,
have read. I mean,
he just copied and pasted a section from the terms.
mhm.
and then I glanced at it. I was like,
I
oh,
know Daniel well enough to think that maybe he didn't read the entire terms of service himself and find that. But yeah, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt because he's a very smart guy. I don't want to, I don't want to call BS on him
I mean, it definitely says there's
publicly.
confidentiality.
Yes.
I'm just looking. I'm just looking through the terms, but yeah, it definitely says that there's confidentiality of private repositories.
Listen, it's shocking to me, shocking that a private company who's VC backed, who provides a free service to the entire developer community in the world, somehow is going to use that data to monetize it so that they can provide you with provide some other type of ancillary value on that product.
Mhm.
That's shocking. I'm
Yeah.
absolutely shocked.
Yeah, I mean that it'd be interesting to see if they might attack it from a machine learning perspective, where even if they're not individually looking at the source code, somehow, again, in aggregate, training models. Although there's no way that can be illegal. I mean, so these are all sort of
Legal?
tinfoil hat. We're very much in the tinfoil hat department right now.
We're way outside of our realm of expertise. I'll say that much. Here's what's weird. This is interesting. Do you think that Magento would have chosen? I don't know. This is weird speculation. Now I'm in weird territory. But do you think Magento would have chosen something like platform.sh that required sort of the delivery model to be on a product like GitHub if it was owned by a behemoth like Microsoft at some point? Like, do you think that's a decision that, in retrospect, that they might regret making, and that Microsoft itself has had its own commerce, play for some time.
Yep.
And
those are exactly, I think, that the types of decisions that start to come into jeopardy a little bit, where it's like the thing with Amazon, telling or Walmart telling their vendors that they can't use AWS, even though in theory and according to all of the legal terms, there should be no reason why Amazon would have access to it from a competitive standpoint, and yet, they did that. So I think that there's definitely going to be an extent to which private repositories are impacted. You mentioned GitLab, and I saw an interesting tweet that posted there's some charts on the number of imported repositories by day.
Yeah.
And it went from, somewhere in the 80, 90, 20 per day. It spiked up to 8,000 per day. And it's still pretty high. It's going from 8 to 7 to 5 to 4. So, I mean, the number of imported repositories per day is like 10 or like a hundred times higher than normal. So that's pretty intense.
I mean, that's the kind of thing that I don't think will last forever. That's one of those sort of, I imported it to see how easy it was to do. I really highly, highly doubt that we'll see major open source companies, major proponents of major open source projects, move them and the entire apparatus over to another platform. It would be way too costly. They've already got an apparatus that's in place, for continuous integration and continuous delivery that, ostensibly should just work on GitLab, but I don't know, man. I think those are knee-jerk reactions of people that are testing things, and we're going to start counting that as full migrations. Nobody does a full migration in one day. It just doesn't happen.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. Yeah. Although it's interesting with source code repositories, they're not exactly the same as like website hosting. Like your website hosting, you're in a world of hurt if you ever need to migrate. But your source code, you don't, like, you could be migrating for several hours or a day, and you're not going to take down any production systems. And so in theory, it could be easier to move from GitHub to something else, as long as you're not really heavily.
It could be. That doesn't mean it's going to be. I mean, you have, I don't know, those kind of migrations. You had, think about how much tooling you had built on Mandrill back in the right,
yeah,
like right when if you go back and listen, 2 years ago to the Mandrill-geddon, I think is what we called it.
I'm gonna get a
at the time.
T-shirt. Mandrill-geddon, never
Yeah,
forget.
tweet that to Mark
Your boy.
Lewis. Yeah, to your boy Mark
Yeah.
Lewis. Tell him he needs to get on that. But Mandrill, when Mailchimp decided to sunset Mandrill for competitive products like MageMail, then or loosely competitive products like MageMail, when they decided to do that, yeah, I mean, essentially they put a lot of people out. I think it created a lot of knee jerk, but some people wound up just having to retool and rebuild it themselves, and it was not insignificant. And I think about the kind of workflows that Magento Community Engineering has right now. Right.
Totally.
Think about how many maintainers and how many contributors they have, and you're going to get all of those people to move over to GitLab, and they're not even like they're not even the largest open source projects that are out there. They're probably one of the highest contribution rates across PHP projects, but there are much larger, more storied efforts out there.
Even just in terms of issue management alone, is enough, right? All the issues, all the tags, all of the familiarity that the whole community has with managing issues on GitHub, that in and of itself would be massively disruptive to try and move somewhere else.
Alejandro again in the chat says, I would like to know how they plan to monetize the deal. This was an interesting thing. Now, as somebody who admittedly doesn't know a whole lot about finance, I don't know that it actually works this way, but I saw an interesting little comment thread on Twitter about how Microsoft saw a 0.8% bump on the day after announcing that they were going to acquire GitHub, and the way that they did it was they issued new stock. So they effectively printed money and diluted the shareholders' value, but the market bump offset the dilution to the shareholder to a net positive gain. So effectively, the way that they bought it was free. In one day, with the offset of an issue of new stock and the appreciation of the stock through the acquisition, they saw almost a net neutral change in their stock price, no loss of shareholder value. Effectively, they just issued new stock. They got it for free. They don't need to turn a profit.
That's some 3D chess level finances right there.
Yeah.
So you're saying the net fraction of a percentage change was 7?
Yes.
Like nets out to 7.5 billion.
Yep.
What?
Yep.
That's pretty wild. I would imagine they have to. I mean, that may correct.
Stock when stocks are at play, it's not like it's bottom line or top line revenue to the company is somehow been altered, or the net value of the company. It all kind of belongs to the shareholders, but Microsoft effectively issued new stock to be able to do it, and that's
I mean, I
don't know that I trust that so much, but that's kind of how one person's take, basically. So if I don't, just to get even deeper into it, P to E ratio, that's a price to earnings ratio.
Okay.
If Microsoft's price to earnings ratio is incredible. It is an incredibly devalued stock when you compare it to other stocks like FANG stocks, like Facebook, Apple, Netflix, Google. Their price of per share to earnings is incredible. If Apple were valued at the same price to earnings as Microsoft, or I'm sorry, the other way around. If Microsoft was valued at the same price to earnings as Apple, they would be worth $4.2 trillion.
What?
They are an incredibly devalued stock when you look at
Is it almost like they don't have the same like halo that
correct.
like
That's
Amazon and Apple
100%,
have?
100%. And I think
Wow.
it's things like this that
Yes.
reposition them to, and especially with the work that they're doing with Cortana. Cortana has been such a sleeper product for the last year. Um, uh, you know, you'd have to talk to Brian Lang over at Future Commerce to get his take on it. But apparently, Cortana has had the best natural language search engine for some time, and
Wow.
an incredible speech to text recognition. And they have put a tremendous amount of investment into AI and into, so the thing that you think Microsoft is not what Microsoft is. Microsoft
Totally.
is very much a hardware company today on the game side, on the gaming side, very much a licensed property, licensed, like they own Minecraft and they own the company that makes Minecraft and Mahjong. You interact with
Really?
Microsoft in so many different ways today that are not what you think about on Windows computers. And so that's why these hot takes about making it like Windows XP and GitHub, having these,
That's the thing. That's totally the thing is that people have this mental model that's I got people texting me at 9:50 p.m. about meetings tomorrow, 2:30. People have this outdated mental model, and it's interesting because it's interesting that like developers we're so used to the ecosystem moving so quickly. There's a new JavaScript framework every other day. There's a new startup, right? There's new startups every day, and we're so used to the industry moving so quickly. But when it comes to these big companies, it's kind of wild that like we're very slow to kind of refresh our mental model of what the company is. Like I still think of Microsoft as like Windows XP mostly. You know what I mean? Even though they're completely different things. Same with Adobe. Like I didn't know anything about all of their marketing acquisitions and things like that.
wow.
So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
just
yeah.
interesting how long, like a reputation sticks around in people's minds. But I mean, I remember at the co-working space I was in, Microsoft came in and they were wanting to court startup
Mm.
founders to come and do spend a summer at the Microsoft campuses, get mentoring, build on Azure. And they've been courting developers and startups for a long time now, doing a bunch of really, really interesting stuff. So,
I mean,
um,
Scott Hanselman is one, in my opinion, is one of the smartest like evangelist types in the world, and has very poignant. Like, I want to be Scott Hanselman when I grow up. I've been following him for years on Twitter,
hmm,
and he like I love his approach to advocacy and like evangelism and the way that he does his job. I look up to this guy, and he is a Microsoft advocate. Like, he's a Microsoft developer advocate. That's his job.
wow,
Um, and people like him uh, are really quality people that work for a company like Microsoft, and I think they're a good barometer for the type of company that Microsoft is today. And I don't think that Microsoft has ever truly, I mean, even through the antitrust sort of era, Microsoft has provided technology that have kept hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people employed and working as developers for 40 years,
yeah,
maybe longer, right? And that's, so we can the thing that I actually care about at the end of the day is whether I have a job and I'm able to put food on the table. That's what I care about. All this other stuff is actually just nice to have.
yeah,
Period.
yeah,
So if I have tools that allow me to do a job and I can stay employed, right? And whether they're closed source or open source, I prefer to work in the open source world. But I mean, if someone's going to pay, like, I have a friend of mine. Here's a good example.
yeah,
A friend of ours, a former developer at Something Digital, who had this phenomenal opportunity to go work on a secret project for a very large unnamed big box retailer, and couldn't tell us anything about it, but left the Magento world to go work on this thing in a closed system. and for a year had no contact with the outside world, and turned up the other day in a press release about the new conversational commerce service that Walmart just launched called Jet Black. And and it is all like SMS texting, concierge, personal shopper type service.
Yeah.
And he was inspired to go chase after working in that system and solving hard problems for a big retailer like Walmart because of his work in the Magento space. And would any of us in the Magento realm disparage him because he's left quote unquote left open source to go help a private company, or to do like, well, you know what I'm saying, like to work on a closed source code base. And but he'll tell you Walmart is a massive contributor to Node. Walmart has been using like they've been using Node.js in their organization to power their marketplace and for years. And so they are giving back too. It's not just that the actual product that you're working on is open or closed. It's like, how are you treating the entire ecosystem anyway?
No, and then that's an interesting thing too, where we talked about this with the Adobe thing, is that so many companies have begun to use open source tools really heavily, and then to contribute back to them. And it goes back to the thing where we don't think about Walmart as like an open source contributor, but they are, and we don't think of Adobe necessarily, although now we do. But maybe 2 weeks ago, us didn't think of Adobe as like open source contributors, but they do on a massive, same with Microsoft, right? And like to an extent, like this is where like one of the things that Matt AC, by the way, is how we pronounce his name, not Assay, Matt AC.
Is it really? Oh, yeah, I didn't know that.
Ben tweeted that out. He one of the things I saw pieces of content where he was saying that open source is really the future of the enterprise, and even for big enterprise companies, they're really betting on open source. You're seeing that in tons of different companies. And it's interesting. You see it at Microsoft, you see it with Adobe, you see it with tons of different really huge companies. And I didn't think about it that way until I started to really think about some of these companies that I thought I had sort of an outdated mental model of what they do. And yeah, it's crazy. I mean, they really are contributing in a major way to open source. So it's pretty wild.
I like this one hot take over on Twitter from Ben Taylor. He says, pulled my source from GitHub. I'm hosting now on a clone I wrote over the weekend in Erlang, Go, and Haskell. I'm running it on a Raspberry Pi cluster encased in a Diceware, locked safe under my footstool, and it's cooled by Bitcoin trader tears and oat milk. And that's basically that's how I basically, anybody who that is
we still have to do like a yes no segment, and that would be a perfect one. Like you could explain that whole thing to me until I understand every component of it. It's funny.
I feel like Alejandra is the only person awake in our chat at the moment. What else should we talk about? This is interesting for us. We've not done an After Dark in a long time. Oh, so our very first After Dark, you never answered. We did an After Dark in our first year, and the only person who showed up was Joe Constant. You remember that?
Yeah, I think I do. I think I do.
It was super sad.
That's fantastic. That is fantastic.
I'm gonna find the episode number if you want to go back and listen to us complain in real time about nobody being on the chat. It was.
Oh, hey, look, Jam Sesh is in the chat.
Oh, it's my wife watching. This is fantastic.
That's funny.
Yeah, Magetalk After Dark was episode 37. Yep.
Nice. Big 37. What else is going on with you, man? What's going on?
Oh Lord.
What's the latest?
I told you I was up at like 3:15 this morning, so I'm super tired.
Oh my God.
Let's see what else. Oh, I had so many people come and talk to me about like they've been sort of inspired about running and weight loss and things like that. So I wanted to put one plug out there and sort of use that as a nice segue to encourage people. So Wednesday, tomorrow, June 6th is World Running Day.
Okay.
So I want to encourage everybody to go out and put some miles in, or a mile or half a mile, whatever you can do. But
Nice.
run or walk or whatever. But don't wait to make a good life choice around your health. Make a health choice starting right now, and make it starting today. So
you're gonna be proud of me. So we've been on Weight Watchers for 3 weeks, me and Angelica, and we're both down 5 pounds, 5.5
no
pounds.
way.
Yeah. So it's really cool, man. I really I'm just laughing in the chat. It's really cool. Like I really feel I feel like I have some control over eating and stuff, which feels really good and feeling a little bit better. And went out, did some skateboarding today. I can't run.
Wait.
I'll take this. I'll take the skateboard around.
Wait.
My
you skateboard?
I do a little skating.
I've never.
Yeah. We've talked about this.
No, we've never talked about skateboarding.
Oh, we've fully talked about this. Yeah, I used to rollerblade when I was a kid, and then skate a little bit, mostly rollerblade. And yeah, my rollerblades broke recently, and so I need to buy some new ones. But the rollerblading industry is not what it used to be. There's only like 2 types of rollerblades on the entire internet. I went to Dick's Sporting Goods, and I can't get like a decent pair. So, which is really good for my ankles, because I can't like really jog very much, but I could rollerblade, pretty.
I've seen you jog. You ran 2 miles with me in San Diego.
Yeah, and then I was limping for like 4 days. It's stupid.
There was a lot of uphill.
Actually, I think the uphill is easier because there's less less
impact.
TJ said my rollerblades turned to dust. Actually, what happened with the rollerblades, I went out and I rollerbladed when it was like 15 degrees here in Austin, Fahrenheit. It was below freezing. In January, the first weeks that I was here. And I was like, because I've never been in like below freezing weather. And so, but in California, so usually if it's cold, you just power through, your body heats up, and you're fine. You feel fine, right? So I'm gonna power through. So I'm like 5 minutes in. At first I'm feeling good. I'm feeling invigorated. And then all of a sudden I'm like, I'm gonna die.
Then you hit a wall.
Yeah, like my lungs felt like they were freezing with like the freezing air coming. So I turned around. I went back home, and then my rollerblades. The next time I saw them, they were like cracked. So I
It was that cold. It was that cold.
Yeah.
Kalen's rollerblades cracked right in half.
Yeah. So anyway, but that's a really cool encouragement you're giving, and you definitely are. Oh, dude. Jam Sesh was was also hardcore into rollerblading. That's intense.
Yeah, that Jam Sesh is my wife, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
I'm having like a visual thing, like where I see Jam Sesh and I'm saying Jam Sesh, even though I know.
Yeah, that's Jackie. My wife Jackie is in the chat right now. I think everybody who grew up sort of with, in their early teens or preteens in the 90s, I think had a rollerblading career of some kind. Do you remember the rollerblade movie? What was that rollerblade movie called?
Was it Roller Boys?
I
think that was the name of my little roller. Oh, there you go.
Airborne.
There you go.
I'm thinking of.
There you go. Yeah.
And it's like everybody wanted to be that, wanted to be the person who's like, the half pipe skater. So I definitely had that moment in my life. And that really was, I think, probably the last time I was into physical fitness of any kind. It was like 16 as a, rollerblading.
That's so funny.
But I don't, so anyway, I want to encourage people that if you want to make a change, health wise, just don't wait. Like, the thing I'll always say like about you is that you're always like conscious of that, and you're always like doing something else. Like, I remember one of our early episode titles is that you got a new bike. Like, you open the show and you're like, I got a new bike.
Yeah,
I remember Kaylin got a new bike. That was that was an episode title. And recently, like within the last 6 months or so, I think you got a stationary bike.
Yeah. Yeah, like I'm always trying.
You're doing something. You're always trying to do something, and I think that that's admirable. Like,
not very effectively, but I'm trying. I'm trying. Like what I've been doing more recently is trying to focus on like playing with the kids. So I'll spend like an hour every day after work and like play catch with them in the yard and just try to make it something physical and stuff like that. So so
don't do what I did. Don't do what I did, and do nothing of any kind, of any movement whatsoever, for any reason, no matter where, no matter what, and just become a blob for 15 years. Don't do that, because that's basically what I did. Because then you have a long way to go. And listen, we all have a long way to go. Nobody actually reaches their goal. That's sort of the weird paradox, is that I'm in this weird spot now where you look in the mirror and you're like, oh, I don't look so bad. And you see a picture of yourself and you're like, oh, is that how other people see me? I have that same thing, but it's in this weird reverse of what it used to be. It used to be I looked in the mirror and I'm like, I'm not so fat. And then I see a picture and I'm like, oh, wow, I'm way fatter than what I think I am. But now I see a picture of me and I'm like, oh, I'm a little skinnier than I actually think I am. So the mental image of myself hasn't changed yet. And I don't know that it will. I think everybody has that struggle. Anyway, I shifted gears, all that to say World Running Day on June 6th. And, so I'm going to get out and try to do a little running tomorrow, even here at IRCE. Nice, and it's super cold too, man. It's like 45 degrees tomorrow. It's going to be miserable.
Oh, wow.
But you got to do something,
Yeah. Yeah. Look at yourself. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make a change. Shout out to Jackie for posting that in the chat.
Yeah, what's funny is so let's talk about my kids for a second, who are cracking me up lately. So have you seen the what was it, the Lego Batman movie?
No, I don't think I did.
You got to see the Lego Batman movie. It's so good. But there's this like recurring gag of he quotes Michael Jackson's "Man in the Mirror" throughout the movie, and it's Will Arnett who plays Batman, the voice of Batman, which is just fantastic. But it's really, really funny because he does that a lot. But my daughter Pierce loves that movie. She wants to be Batman. Like, she just wants to be Batman when she grows up, and we all should strive to want to be Batman when we grow up.
True.
But he, in this one scene in the movie, he eats lobster thermidor because he's Bruce Wayne. He's and he's bougie, and so he eats lobster thermidor for dinner. And so my daughter is like on this thing now that she wants to go eat lobster thermidor somewhere, and she wants us to take her to go eat lobster thermidor. And I think I know she's gonna hate it once she tries it, but I kind of want to just take her anyway, because I know the whole excitement of I'm gonna go eat the meal that Bruce Wayne eats.
Right.
Right. You see me smiling. I can't get over that. That's gonna be amazing. She's gonna freaking love that.
Yeah.
I don't know if your kids are like that at all. My kids are in this really fun place right now that just everything's fun. Everything's fun and everything's new.
I don't know if there's any particular like movie or show that they're super into, but this one funny thing happened recently. So we have some neighbors that moved in, and This is funny because it's public. I'm sure they'll never see it. But
That's okay. You drag people through the mud on your Twitter that you know anyway, so you might as well talk about people that nobody else knows.
No, it's totally innocent, but basically they have I think 10 or 11-year-old son, and they were playing scooters out in front of the yard, and or riding bikes or whatever, and so my daughter's 8-year-old and 3-year-old went out, and they were riding, and it was really cool. They were starting to play together, and then they started to race. And so I noticed that when they raced, my daughter Olivia, 8-year-old, she beat the 11-year-old boy, right?
No way.
Yeah. And I was like, nice. And then later on at dinner or something, we were sitting down, and I was telling my wife, and I was like, yeah, I was like, she beat, the boy. And then I was all proud of her. And then Olivia's like, what's such a big deal about that? And
Oh wow.
I was like, well, boys are usually faster than girls. And she was like, and she got so mad at me. And I was like, it was cool because she just it's like she doesn't have any baggage at all around, any of those things and stuff. So she's just like, and I think maybe part of that is being homeschooled too, is just she thinks she can just do anything. And so that was cool to see.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. It's funny. We're in this place where, yeah, my at 6 and 7 years old, my two kids, their worldview is effectively my worldview, right? Like it's what I'm teaching them for what it should be, and so it's funny that you kind of watch this little version of yourself sort of parroted back at you from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't come up against that sort of stuff. I think um, it's interesting when you start to see. I don't know. Like I get these weird. I get attitude from from my oldest, from Camille, and she's only 7, but she'll say things like, you know, like things like, I think that really lame things are cool. Like I'm already getting that sort of thing, and I'm like, where's that coming from? Like, Dad, you listen to boring, music, and you don't know what's cool. We listen to Uptown Funk, and I'm like, I'm not coming up with a great example right now, but I totally understand what you're talking about. What's funny is okay, let's bring this back to Magento for a second, because I do get the sense sometimes, not that you and I, are like the progenitors of any one person's opinion in the Magento community, but I do get the sense that sometimes people look to us for our takes on certain things. And can you imagine what a community of people might think or feel about something like the Adobe acquisition if you and I were really sour on it? Like, what's your take on that? Do you think that we have some sort of do we exert some sort of an influence, or do you think that we affect the way that people think about these sorts of things?
I don't know, dude. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe not. Who knows? To some extent, is it a 1% or 2% or 80%? I don't know. Maybe closer to a 2%. But Alejandro says you guys are Batman. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Try as I might, I'm trying to keep this conversation going. It's not happening at 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah, we might have to call it. By the
Oh,
way,
let's talk a little bit about my live streams, because we haven't ever
okay.
talked about that on this so far. Did you check out any of the Twitch live streams that I've been doing?
Oh yeah, I did. I saw the first one, the first one in the series. I think you've done 3 now, where you were installing PWA or something like that. That was
Yeah.
really fun, dude. Because I've been thinking that for a while. It'd be cool for somebody to just do a live stream of some coding, or some stuff like that, and then you just did it. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I kind of want to make Twitch that place for me to continue to try to exercise that. I might try to squeeze that in here this week as well, since I'm here at IRCE. I'm going to try to find a little bit of time to do that. I think that can be an endless series, because I think we're going to continue to have to learn and contribute to PWA, the PWA effort. I'm thinking that, as we the value that was sort of being explained to I asked someone at the meetup last week. So we had the Magento meetup on Thursday last week, and Jimmy Sanford, who's a developer for the PWA team from Magento, came and he shared at the meetup about Magento's approach for PWA Studio, and it's funny because there was such a mix of people at the Magento meetup, and they told me, "Man, that series that you're doing is super awesome." And because I, as a front end developer, I had no idea how to set up my own Magento environment. I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Right. So as a front end developer, like, the stuff you're doing right now is super valuable to me. And then I had someone who's a back end developer who's like, laughing that it took me 40 minutes to get PHP installed, and like, we're still installing PHP. Ha 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 ha. But for them, it's like, oh, well, I haven't used Valet before, and I've been wanting to dip my toe into figuring out how Valet works. And to another person, it's like, oh, I've never installed Magento through or the sample data or Magento before. Like, everybody's getting some other little value out of it. And so another person is like, I didn't know you could search bash history with Control R. Like, it's funny that little throwaway things that I don't even think about that I do.
It's the little things.
Yeah. And there's certain pieces across this whole spectrum that are somehow valuable to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me feel like, okay, this hasn't been totally worthless. Like,
yeah.
Just Philip trying to figure out, how this PWA thing works. I think once we get to the React ecosystem, which is kind of where I'm at right now, and actually trying to do something useful or figure out GraphQL, then the backend developers are going to be like, oh, this is a whole new world of things that I've, have no idea about. And they're going to get so much value out of it. So
yeah, it's so cool that you did that, because nobody know, like, none of us know what we're doing. We're all just trying to figure it out. And whether it's installing, the PWA stuff or whatever, if it's your first time doing it, we all run into those crazy snags. We all stare at the computer for 45 minutes, totally lost. And just putting yourself out there and live streaming it was really cool. I actually, like, the whole time I was like, man, I want to live stream code something. But then you inspired me to do it. But then I was like, I don't know, there's nothing I really want to code, So I'm just so not in a coding mode recently. It's kind of embarrassing.
Maybe the next time you open up MailChimp to just spam people, you should, just live stream that. This is how I spam tens of thousands of people.
I did have one thing I was thinking about, because on this one day, one of the interviews was canceled. And then I was like, oh, maybe I'll live stream some GDPR compliance stuff with Commerce Hero. Like, there's a few things I should probably build and as far as some GDPR related stuff. And it's one of those things where, like, you want to pick something that's not too ambitious, right? So that you don't like basically what you did, installing something, where you like get a little bit I'm not that brave where I wanted to do something where, like, it's tight enough that I know I could knock it out without too much trouble, so I was about to do that, and then another interview ended up happening, so I just did that instead. But it's kind of wild with Adam Wathan's live stream. I popped in quickly today. I saw you had like 250 live viewers. I was like, dude, it's a whole other level.
Yeah, he's on a totally different level. He also has an interesting audience. That's, he does this with some frequency, right? Like, he does a lot of live live demo type work. With especially like Tailwind CSS. And I've watched a bunch of that stuff because I want to learn it myself, and it's sort of experiential. It's like, I would learn by trying to do it myself, but I'm going to learn by watching someone else do it and sort of work their way through in real time how they do it, which is different to how I used to engage with like Tuts Plus or Envato, or later, when Jeffrey Way started Laracasts, which was super nice and very polished. But you don't watch someone like make a mistake and then have to work through it, and trying to figure out and debug the issue, which is what I think we're actually getting out of like Adam Wathan, in those types of live coding situations.
I think I saw somewhere Jeffrey Way referenced doing something live. I don't know if he's started to do some live streams, in addition to the standard kind of Laracast format. One thing you mentioned, which I think would be super fun, would be to do like site teardowns or kind of
yeah, I do want to do that. I think that's
basically basically like the e-commerce Hall of Shame thing, but whether it's it doesn't have to be a Hall of Shame. But like just we've done that before on the podcast, and that would be hysterical if we could do like a screencast plus like both of our heads in the corner, and just breaking things down. That'd be kind of fun.
What I think that kind of content actually is really useful if you can pair that with, if it could be highly produced, where we actually have like some really thoughtful. I think my video froze again. This is annoying.
Tiny bit. It'll probably come back in.
I'm gonna have to figure out how this this thing works. This is my first time using it, so I'm not gonna get too mad at it.
Magetalk. Yeah, I mean, and especially on the hotel Wi-Fi, like you gotta experiment with these. It's crazy how like
finicky.
How finicky, and then you got to get a camera and then a connector and then a different type of connector, and there's so many different things you got to get before it's all said and done. I finally am somewhat comfortable with my setup, but
how long did it take you to get to that place? That's what I'd like to know.
It took like a month or two, like
everyday streaming.
Yeah, of everyday doing some kind of video. I've only been streaming like the past month or so, but recording video like every day, I think now for like 2 months. And I was using a different camera, a Canon, which worked great. But then when I started live streaming, the Canon didn't have the HDMI output that I needed, so I returned that. Got a Panasonic. Shout out TJ for helping me with a lot of those hardware decisions. And then lighting, and then I got new lights, and then my tripod wasn't the right type, so I had to get a new tripod. And then I got the tripod, but it didn't have the twisty angleable thing on the top, so I had to order that separately, so that the thing could be angled.
Oh my word!
It just never ends. It's just so many different.
There's so many. Things. Yeah, there's so many little things too. Like you can spend tremendous amount of money. I'm going super budget on this, but that's okay. And for me too, I never know where I'm going to be. That's the tough thing, is that I'm not only am I mobile in that I travel a good deal for work, but I travel between locations when I'm working at home, right? So when I am in Florida, so I might be taking meetings in my office downtown on one day, but I might actually be at home another day. And so I need something that's, reasonably portable and easy to set up. And this seems like it might be that. I'm just gonna have to work
hack at it a little bit.
Yeah, I have to figure it out.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, I was on something before, which is I think from a site teardown perspective, if you were to do that kind of content, I think it's super valuable, but it could live on for so much longer if you had a bunch of different people have different takes on it. So instead of just the Phil and Kalen take, you could have like a UX expert. Like, what does Danielle Mundele, what does she think of this site? What does like, could we hallway test it? Could we ask what get a man on the street perspective and how what their perspective is on the site and the brand? That would be super interesting, and sort of cut it together. Like, remember those like VH1 like those VH1 sort of interview shows where you would like they would talk about like some music video from the 90s or like the best
Behind the
band.
music.
Right. Yeah, behind the music.
Yeah.
And you'd have like it's always the same 20 people on the show, right? And they cut it together in such a way that it's like it sort of tells a story. And I'd love to have that sort of like perspective where you have many people's points of view. So, but you can't sit around waiting for this, you know, this best, like how would I do this in its best form ever, or else you'll never do it. So I think we should try to do that.
Got to hit the ground.
Yeah.
I've been part of I think why I've been doing more of the interviews on the with the Commerce Hero YouTube channel is because I really like just getting other just talking to a bunch of like when I would imagine I have all these different conversations with people that I haven't seen in a while. I really enjoy that, and
you want to recreate that feeling.
I want to recreate that. That's what I'm trying to do. I want to recreate that, and it's never perfect over the internet, you know, but it's some level of an approximation. But it's cool to be able to talk to different people in the community and get their feedback on things, get their thoughts on things, learn from them. You know, so I've been enjoying that. It's been kind of fun. Tomorrow we got Alan Kent on. Obviously IRCE came up, so we weren't able to make that a Magetalk. So that's gonna be fun. I'm kind of nervous about that, but kind of excited. I've been like binge reading his whole blog, so I'll have, you know, hopefully one or two decent, reasonable questions for him. But this should be fun. Wish me luck.
Yeah, wish me luck with that. I'm in that same spot in that, you know, I'm reading Alan's blog, and I don't even know half the stuff he's talking about nowadays. It's like Google Assistant stuff, and I'm like, oh gosh, that's a whole other world. So I'm interested to see. I won't be able to watch it live, but I'm interested to watch the video back. Gosh, there's so much content nowadays. It's hard to catch it all.
It's just absurd.
You cannot Pokemon this stuff. Let me tell you what, because I cannot catch it all.
You can't.
Gosh, that was a terrible joke.
That was a bad one.
Have we been going for an hour and a half?
It's been a while. It's been a minute. Yeah.
We got to make this stop. This is
a solid after dark. Yeah. I think we've done a solid job of it.
I feel very solidly done with this.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, thanks for tuning in. Phil, any last parting words? I mean, you're on the ground at IRCE. Any last words before we close it out?
If you're here, or if you're watching this, let's see. I don't leave until end of day, or June 7th, end of day, I think is the last day of the conference. So if you're still around and you're in Chicago and you want to meet up, let's make it happen. I'll be here at IRCE at the Something Digital booth for the next 2+ days. It'll be a good time too. And keep a lookout, because on Future Commerce, we're going to have a good amount of content that's going to drop from this show. Both Brian and I have separate sort of man on the street stuff that we're doing for IRCE this year that was nice. It's going to be very specifically focused around, you know, future of commerce type content, plus some interesting content that we're co-producing with Vertex and IRCE, who are two of our sponsors over there, helping us provide some content for that show. So Brian and I will be putting that together this week. So look for that in the very near future. It'll be a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks for tuning in. Be sure to do a 5-star on iTunes. All the you know the whole spiel. As Phil's zooming in on his face in the
5-star iTunes. Give us a 5-star on iTunes. Do it now.
Like it, a subscribe, stuff on YouTube, all that kind of stuff. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next week.